In 1986, I was teaching art at the Lakers School in 5 Acres, Berry Hill, where I was approached by Michael Darbin, a BBC unit manager, for the production of a new Dennis Potter work called The Singing Detective. Apparently I was recommended because of my interest in local history and that I lived in the Potter family home Speancop on Joyford Hill. I toured the forest with Mike, looking for suitable woodland locations. Also, he decided to hire Bishopswood Hall near the River Wye, several miles away from Berry Hill, as the Berry Hill Social Club. Dennis Potter, however, was having none of it. He laid down that the club scenes must take place in Berry Hill. So on my recommendation, the Berry Hill Memorial Hall, known as the Hut, was hired, and the rugby club also hired as locality HQ. I was then asked to hire a dozen senior citizens from Berry Hill as extras for the club scenes to give them authenticity. The filming took place over several days and the stars mingled with the local people. Alison Steadman played pool in the club in her dressing gown, and Jim Carter and Patrick Malahide spent their time between takes sharing stories with the local extras and enjoying a few pints of beer at the same time. The director, John Emile, was a brilliant popular handler of people. He even listened to advice from Ivor Stodge Bowkett, but whether he acted on it I can't recall. John gave me a script for The Singing Detective as a thank you for my contribution, and I gave him a set of my free mining prints to remember us by.
Right, this is about the very first time that I ever wrote to the press. In 1978, Pennies from Heaven was first shown on television. I'd watched it and had been profoundly impressed at Potter's brilliance, his artistry and originality. However, when the Dean Forest Guardian was published the following week, I was astonished with a tirade of blinkered criticism and slagging off, especially from one otherwise eloquent reverend. I had watched what I thought was an important work and knew it was a milestone in playwriting and television drama. I'd opened a Forest bookshop 2 years previously and had written to Dennis Potter, inviting him to open it. Because in his book Changing Forest, which he published I think is in 1962, he had written and lamented that there was no bookshop in the Forest of Dean, so I thought that might have been an encouragement to him. I received no reply. And no wonder, because with all this animosity about, I think I knew why. I wrote from the heart. I wrote, the use of the word pornographic, because that's what was used, in connection with Dennis Potter's sensitive and uncondoning portrayal of complex human emotions and natural relations, must either be irresponsible or extremely naive. I don't know whether I had swayed any opinions or not, but I remain proud to this day that I wrote what I did, and contented that all these years later I was proved to be right about Dennis Potter as an important British playwright.
It was 1959. The photograph was taken by the Dean Forest Guardian of a scene from Between Two Rivers. We used to congregate in the Coffee Tavern in St John Street. It was owned by Bert and Doreen Young. Word got around that Dennis Potter was looking to make a film about the forest, and he wanted a group of young people doing what young people used to do. We thought we were the cutting edge, drinking from our bottles of Coke with straws. I was 17. I am sitting on the left next to Joe Short, Chunky Jones, Roy Taylor and Adrian Wright. I was subconsciously thinking, I have got to keep this fag out of the picture, because our headmaster, Scuddy Leaning, would have been very displeased had he seen it. Sadly, unbeknown to me, the local newspaper showed me holding the offending cigarette. I don't really know, and I don't really remember, but I would like to think that the chap on the far left of the photo is Dennis Potter, offering some advice and prompts. Everyone seems to be smiling at him, so I hope it was him.
Blue Remembered Hills was my childhood, down to a T. My friend and I were the two young girls in this play, and the boys were my brothers and a friend. It depicted the freedom we had to roam the woods, make cabins out of ferns and tree branches. We went off in the morning and came back at tea time. There was no danger like today. Not many people had cars, so everyone living in Broadwell were known to everyone. What a lovely time for young children growing up. I knew Dennis Potter through going to Lydney Town Hall dances about 1954. We were all together on Saturday nights, firstly gathering in the Feathers Hotel for a drink. We all felt very sophisticated. One night, we found that in the hotel they had a chart up with all the names of the people staying there and what time they wanted to be called on the Saturday morning. We all thought, including Dennis, that we would change the times. We all had a great laugh, but got out of the Feathers very quickly before they discovered what we had done. We all had great times at the dances. I don't think at that time we knew we were in the company of a man that was going on to greater things. Later on, I was going across Valley Road, Cinderford, when the Two Rivers was being filmed, and Dennis was there. I tooted to him and waved, and he waved back. That was the last time I saw him.
I had a similar background to Dennis, attending the same schools, Christchurch and Bells, and Sunday school. And our fathers were both miners. It was socially we came mainly into contact, meeting in the White Hart pub in Covert. We would sometimes migrate to other pubs or Lydney dance. It was here Dennis wanted me to introduce him to Margaret, who was a previous girlfriend of another of my friends. We went one evening to the Travellers' Rest pub near Covert and were drinking at the bar when we were all approached by a young man who sounded like the village yokel. "Ha! You lot be Hoxford types," he said, which amused us all, as both Dennis and another friend were Oxford undergraduates at the time. At the end of the evening, Dennis and myself sometimes walked back to Berry Hill together. I asked him one night, en route, what he wanted to do after Oxford, and he said, "I want to scribble." He obviously achieved his aims.
The Rurdine Bears, and how such a wonderful village tradition turned into a nightmare for its villagers. This story came to haunt Dennis and his understanding of these animals and the loving Frenchmen who had been part of the forest scene for generations. The outcome was The Beast with Two Backs, which allowed Potter to explore the duplicitous side of our inner selves. His next work, through which our lives touched, was during the filming of Pennies from Heaven. I had written about the forest and would have loved to have saved Minnie Wynn's cottage, the cottage within its idyllic setting. Strangely, Dennis had picked up on this area, Minnie Wynn's cottage, and his setting close to the iconic Meadowcliff Ponds. Dennis wished to use this area for the opening scenes and for the dialogue between Cheryl Campbell and Bob Hoskins. Minnie was eventually persuaded to vacate the cottage for the weeks of filming, albeit at an enhanced fee. For my trouble, I had again witnessed a preservation dream disappear, as Minnie Wynn's cottage went under the bulldozer.
I was 13 playing a 9-year-old. I spent the summer of 1985 sitting up a tree, wearing a full harness and a costume. I waited to be filmed. There were 2 cables coming down both legs of my shorts, which miraculously you cannot see. I was only allowed down at lunchtimes because it took so long to get up there. Up in a cherry picker and abseiling down. One time up the tree I asked for a drink to be sent up in a pulley. I requested Ribena. This got me into trouble because my tongue went all red. "Who allowed him Ribena?" they shouted. Still up the tree, when we shot the "When I Grow Up" speech, It took 24 takes to get it right, because a plane flew over, then an ice cream van was heard in the village below, and at least 15 were stopped before I started speaking. I spent weeks up that tree. It will certainly be something I'll never forget.
I'm a Dennis Potter fan with quite a collection of his books, music and films. I think he's very important to the forest and his work should be celebrated more than it is in the area where he came from. I never met him, but I can claim to have been on location at Goodrich Castle and in the street in Lidbrook when The Beast with Two Backs was filmed in 1968. It seemed to take all day, and I vividly remember a scene in Lidbrook when a crowd were shouting obscenities at the bear and his owner. The producer thought the extras were rubbish and made them stand aside for a group of locals to take their place, with proper forest accents and expressions. I've since met many people who've been extras in his works, and they all speak about it with a sense of pride. I remember well the controversy that always seemed to follow a showing of his latest work, and the anticipation in the area when a new work was about to be shown. Like Potter, my own son also went to Oxford and held the position of chairman of the Oxford Union, so I have a good understanding of how it must have been for Potter in his time. My own personal favourite of Potter's work is Shaggy Dog, slated by the critics, but in my opinion a priceless bit of work with a typical Potter twist at the end.
It was 1983 and I was working as house manager at Hampstead Theatre in Swiss Cottage, North London, where Dennis Potter's Sufficient Carbohydrate was showing. My memory of him, although was professional, not personal, was very brief, but it was a very strong one. He spent many evenings, especially through the previews of the play, sitting in the bar, smoking constantly, holding his cigarettes in his white gloves, which he wore to cover up his skin. He always had a glass in front of him. I think he drank whiskey. What struck me more than anything about Dennis was his warmth and willingness to talk to anyone sitting or working in the bar. He was very open about himself, his illness and his work. He seemed to love to chat, and his warmth went very deep, which I realised when many years later I actually came to settle in the Forest of Dean, was a true forest trait. And like my experience of other writers, directors and producers in the theatre, Dennis didn't seem like a lovey. When he came to the first night party, he insisted on paying for the entire thing, and also insisted that all staff from the theatre were involved. Bar staff, cleaners, not just actors and stage staff, which was the norm. Never before, since Sufficient Carbohydrate, did I see that happen. He seemed to truly live his political ideals in that sense. I remember him giving me a cheque for the party. It was quite a lot of money, and it was my job to bank it. And the cheque said, "Pennies from Heaven account," written on it. It was a really nice feeling taking that cheque to the bank.